No, but the line was love them equally and treat them uniquely. Hello and welcome to the Retireable Podcast. I'm Mike Wallace.
And I'm John Sauger.
How you doing today, John?
I'm good, Mike. I'm good. You?
I'm doing fine. Yeah. I just got back from Hilton Head in South Carolina. I had never been there before. You ever been there, John?
I don't think I have,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
Been to
It's
Myrtle Beach, but not Hilton Head.
yeah. Myrtle Beach, I've heard about. I've never been to Myrtle Beach either. And my brother-in-law's family, his son is a senior in high school, so they invited us down, and we
Oh, the old spring break.
Spring break, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, we spent some time down there, and then both my kids came, or two of my three kids came. David drove down from Purdue, which is kind of nice, last minute, but he came, and which was great. But it's beautiful down
Yeah,
there, and the weather
very
was
nice.
great. And yeah, I hear like Hilton Head's a little nicer than Myrtle Beach. It is a little bougie, to be honest with you. But it's fantastic. You know, it was good. I got some golf in, which helps. Yeah.
We were gonna golf a little bit over the weekend, but then it got cold. But we did. All my kids were in town. We went to Tigers opening day. So
Well, that's right. And they won.
they did. They
Yeah.
did. They did. It was very nice. It was cold all week, and then mostly a little overcast, a little sun peeking out, but almost 70. So it was very nice.
It was almost 70 that day. I know it was a nice day because I heard people were golfing that day, and
It
so
was the warmest I think I've ever been to opening day for the Detroit Tigers.
Oh, okay, great. Well, yeah, you're right. We've been to
A
some
lot of
over the years.
Yeah, we were in
Yes.
some cold gears. It rained in the morning, and then the rain cleared out, and it was, by the time we got down there about, 9:45, 10 o'clock, it was, windy, but then sunny, so
Well, when you have that nice of a day, though, there's probably lots of people out there, eh?
it was pretty crowded. Yeah, it was pretty crowded.
Well, it's Good Friday, so
A lot of
a
people are
lot of
off.
people are off.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. So yeah, it was pretty crowded most of the day, but I mean, it's normal how it's crowded down there, but it seemed a little bit more. Like the place we usually park and tailgate was almost full by the time we got there, which is weird. Usually it's in like an overflow spot. It's usually pretty open, so I was kind of surprised by that, but it's still good. It's very nice.
And how many of your kids came?
All three kids, two significant others. One couldn't make it, so and then we had some friends that met us down there. But we had a 8-passenger vehicle, so I was able to drive everybody, and
Oh my
so everybody was
gosh.
able to have a good time.
How fun. No, it's a great excuse to spend some time with your kids,
Yeah,
huh?
absolutely. The fun thing was my youngest had to work part of the morning, and so she works in Ferndale, which is not too far from down. So we just pay Uber down here and meet us up. So she was pretty tickled to meet up and everything. So it worked out well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, that's good. That's good. Good to hear, and it's always fun, and it's a holiday, I tell you.
It is. It is. It gets tiring after a while, right? I mean, you're there early in the morning, getting ready, getting set up, doing all your things, and then we were downtown till probably 6 o'clock, and then came back to get some food and stuff. But by 8, 9 o'clock that night, after being outside all day, you're wiped out.
Did anybody go to the game, or just
None of our group. No, none of our group. This sounds strange, but if you're having some beverages and whatnot, you're not paying attention to the game. My oldest and my son-in-law, the two of them, they've kind of gotten into scoring games. The scorebook and stuff. So they were pretty happy. My son had a shortwave radio with him, so they could try and listen to the game and score it. So that was kind of fun. But as the more beverages happened, the less that really took place.
No, I have not gotten tickets in a while. One of the last times I got tickets, I bought. It was freezing out, and so like we ended up, standing inside in one of the Tiger
Yeah, like the
bars.
heat.
Anyways,
Yeah,
you're watching it. I'm like,
exactly,
okay, you know
exactly.
what? I'm gonna,
Well, there's
warm
also
up and stuff like that.
There's also a component where if they're having a handful of beverages, they want to be out hanging out with people and doing stuff. Like for my kids, they're like, "Dad, I can go to a game any day."
Yeah,
The
we'll visit.
the
Your
opening
visit.
day game isn't that big
Yeah.
of a deal for them.
Yeah, no,
So,
yeah, it's all about visiting with
Yes.
that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the groups down there are
Oh
huge.
my
It's so
goodness.
fun.
The I mean, all the little things that worked out. So my daughter's boyfriend, my youngest, her boyfriend is finishing his degree in aviation. And so, very interested in so that was one of the things. I was like, okay, well, we got to get from our tailgate, which you can't necessarily see a whole lot. You know, you're on the outskirt a little bit. Wanted to get down to at least like Grand Circus Park where they have a big open tailgate area. I wanted to get there by a certain time so he could see the flyover, because that's always cool. And, just all the different things they could see. So it was like everybody had like something we had to get them there for. So it was cool to just to kind of see, so,
Yeah.
but it was the first time everybody was able to make it. Last year we had a smaller group because a couple people couldn't make it. So this year, my wife was able to make it, all three kids. So that was really cool. That was good. Couldn't ask for better.
That's well, the weather helps too. I mean, it makes it that's all the difference in the world, you're not freezing that day. It's all good. Well, it's fantastic. Well, today we're gonna talk a little bit about what we call high net worth individuals. When John and I first got into business, we were dealing with a lot of individuals. And back, when I got in the business in 1991, a typical retiree had somewhere between, let's say 300,000 and $500,000 that they could retire on comfortably. But a lot of those individuals then, of course, had pensions back then as well,
Different
right?
world. Yeah, for sure.
And so now what's happening is, people have to save a lot more money, to retire comfortably if they don't have a pension. And so we're now starting to see a lot more of these middle class millionaires. Okay. And so a lot of these individuals that had the three to $500,000 30 years ago now are retiring with $1 to $2 million
Yeah. Yeah.
basically. And even I recently read in the USA Today, it was something about, I think, 1.4 or $1.46 million is like the sweet spot
Yeah.
nowadays,
Yeah.
or it used to be $1 million, and it went to 1.3 and 1.4, 1.5. And again, we talk in many of the things a lot of it's just lifestyle, right? So is that enough for some people that want to live a little bit nicer lifestyle, or other individuals that don't need that much of a lifestyle? But that was just kind of a generality that they talked about. But what's starting to happen now is some of these people that were middle class millionaires are now, the market's been done pretty well the last, whatever, 20
Sure.
years or so.
Sure.
And so now, some of these individuals now are having, $3 to $5 million or even $5 to $10 million. And so now when we're dealing with these things, we're starting to consider a little bit more high net worth, which needs a little bit more advanced planning when it comes down to that.
Yep,
Okay.
especially in today's day and age, because you're talking, you might have highly appreciated assets inside of there that might have a unique tax burden, or a lot of people are, especially if you're an original marriage and so you haven't had, because the people that'll get divorced, they have to kind of restart or whatnot. But especially a lot of these original marriages that have been in 401ks or retirement accounts for 30 plus years, if you were putting money in there, just a time value of money, you're a couple $1 million, right? I mean, it's sizable. So what a lot of these people see.
So there's a lot of considerations with that then too, so when we're looking at that, then, so we're going to talk about, when we talk about high net worth individuals, and if you're dealing with the definition of that, depending who you're talking to, you're going to have many different definitions. We're considering, high net worth typically going to be somewhere between $3 and $10 million. Okay. Some people will say 5 to 15, but we're in that ballpark.
Yeah, it depends on where
3
you're
to
at.
5 million
Right?
is the
Yeah.
starting point.
Yeah, what's a few million among friends?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. And then once you start to get over 10 or $15 million, then it's considered, well, even some of them are like $25 million plus, like the ultra high net worth. We're not talking about that right now. We're dealing with a lot of the typical individuals that were striving to be millionaires, and now oftentimes have multi-million dollars, in their portfolios.
Well, and your it's funny. The Wall Street Journal had an article over the weekend that was talking about what income is to get you to be upper middle class, right? And I think there's a difference between middle class, upper middle class, et cetera. When we're referencing high net worth, we're not talking about income in this situation. We're talking about people at or near retirement age, that have amassed assets outside of their normal income, right? You could have a $50,000 income, but you've done really, really well in different parts of life, and I'm not, and you've amassed a high net worth, so when we're talking about the net worth, it's the simple component of what's your retirement assets, what's your savings, what's your your investable assets, et cetera, compared to your debt, right? So in that situation, that 3 to 10 million is a like you said, you've seen different categories of what fits area. That generally we look at it a little bit differently. Maybe it's not a need. You don't need to do planning. You're not going to run out of money. Most situations like that. Is that a fair way of looking at it? So it's a different mindset too.
Oh yeah, yeah. So most people that have accumulated that kind of wealth, now a matter of whether it's wealth preservation or trying to making sure that they're not being taxed too much on it. But also trying to manage it for what they're trying to accomplish, and that's the hardest part sometimes because a lot of people that have amassed that kind of wealth, you're right. They know that they're going to be fine for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
More than likely, they're not going to ever run out of money.
Yeah.
But the issue is, how do we now protect what they've accumulated their entire lifetime, against whether it's taxes or whether it's market loss or whatever else.
Sure. Well, and you've seen it. You've seen it in all the different in time in the industry, whether it's working with families and experiencing it yourself, or whether it's seen in different workshops or whatnot. You get that point where almost everybody has that first step of, can I afford to retire? Do I have some savings? Do I have some income? Do I have some money to enjoy? Right. And you get those, and it's like, when you're at that number, you're like, okay, I got all those three. Well, then it's, what's the next step? How am I leaving a legacy? How am I enjoy, et cetera. And yeah, you get into that conversation of, what does that look like? Right.
Well, and it is interesting though sometimes, because obviously we've both seen this before, where these people have amassed quite a bit of a fortune there, but they're still worried, because they are used to not budgeting, they're used to having an income coming in, and if they want to retire, they still want to make sure they're able to maintain that standard of living.
Well, and it's really interesting, Mike, because you look at it just from yourself, from your own standpoint. You go, okay, I make X number of dollars. My wife makes X number of dollars. Here's where we're at. But it's still unique. Like, you still put yourselves in the mind frame of people that you're around with, right? And over the weekend, I was around a lot of family members who, they're not in the same financial situation as my wife and I. And I'm not saying it one way or the other, but you feel their situation. I was talking with a good friend over the weekend, and he's like, I've never had a more difficult spot with work. Here's the stress. Here's the different things. He's talking about all the different things in the economy. And, hey, John, how are you? And you're like, I don't want to go, hey, things are different for me. But so you have those conversations so a lot of times people with this, in a high net worth, they might not know it either, right? They may not see it. They might not feel it. So there is still a component there of, what do you feel in your own house, or how does it feel? Yes. Like, whether it's budgeting, whether it's, just concerns about things, for sure.
Well, and I think you made a good point. Is oftentimes it's not the need anymore; it's now the want. And what we find is that, and one of the reasons that a lot of people work with our firm is that it's the uniqueness of the individuals, and what do they want themselves, because it does become, it's not just about finances anymore, and sometimes it is, but a lot of it's, now more comprehensive financial planning, maybe extensive tax planning, estate planning, if the component of that, and then even a unique investment platform, because everybody has a different mindset of how they should be invested.
And there's the other side of the coin of when you know what the numbers are. I'm not going to say this as an exact statistic, but as you sit down with people, just that feeling of, most people that get to a higher net worth component, they have a pretty good idea that they're doing well, right?
Yeah.
They still need you to explain it, maybe put it in context, but they're not sitting there with $5 million going, oh my gosh, everybody else I know has $20 million. That just doesn't normally happen, right? That sometimes they have, that is, but by and large, they're going, okay, I'm doing okay.
I'm going to be fine.
Yes, I'm doing okay.
Yep.
And so there is that part, going back to that unique investment platform. There is that part of, we all want to be told we're special, right? We all want to be told we're unique, so that unique investment platform idea is very common nowadays, because people want to know that, well, I have, XYZ funds, but so does everybody else. What is, so they want to have that. That is a big one. I'm finding that more and more, that people want that uniqueness.
Well, the uniqueness, I mean, frankly, a lot of it is not even available unless they have a certain amount of net worth.
Correct. Yeah. Or have to be at least an accredited investor, or even more. Yeah.
So a lot of the platforms that are out there, you may need $1 million or more, to even invest in that. So you may need have some unique platforms that, and sometimes with some of that stuff too, is that it may not be appropriate either if you don't have that kind of money,
Absolutely. Well,
because some of it's time consumption,
yes, yes,
or a time commitment, I should say,
yes.
not time consumption, or maybe more risk than the average investor should have, depending on your unique situation. Yeah.
Yep. Well, and I think along that process of that, it's a it's there's that feeling when you see people in this situation, like it's not always just, hey, I put money into this one account and it got me to that level, right? It's usually a
Yeah.
combination of a bunch of things. Maybe a business, maybe some real estate, maybe an inheritance, maybe some investing, maybe multiple people investing, maybe multiple different platforms. There's all kinds of different types of stuff. And so I want this all to work together, right? There and there's what I find in this frame is people are looking, it's like you and your wife or me and my wife, or you're looking going, we built this, right? But we're the ones that know what's going on with it. We want to step away now and not have to manage it all the time. I need to interview and interact with somebody that I know can step in and do, like, they need to know all these different things,
Yeah.
right? I find that the number of times real estate conversations come up, and having, like, on my team, I have a person that has a 30-year background in real estate.
Yeah.
The number of times those conversations come up, almost, I mean, it's a very high percentage of the time that something, hey, we're selling this property, or hey, we have this extra property we don't need anymore, or hey, we have these 6 properties, or we're looking into getting another property. I mean, that conversation comes. So it's like that. What the term I've heard many different times is like that concierge level service, right? You want someone that knows your unique situation and can handle all those things, right? If you think of a concierge at a great hotel or a great look at, you go there and say, I need this, and they'll figure it out. You don't have to think, how are they going to get me that restaurant, or how are they going to get me that ride or those tickets or whatnot? But that's really what you're looking for. A concierge is someone to help you with that. And that's kind of where high net worth planning seems to fit in my.
Well, and I think that's exactly it. And I think also it's a lot of things that we do is math, when it comes down to it. And when we're dealing with that, to having the programs and the software to just show things, and understand that. But one of the concepts that I like that we've learned over the years as well is the I we, or the me we thee theory, And so basically, if they have X number of dollars, just say that you have $5 million or so, when we say me, oftentimes the me is husband and wife. What do we need to live on? Like, so what is our net worth? What do we need for income wise? What do we need to have some fun, etc. And so, or even like, let's say if we sit down like 3 years from now, John, what would you be happy that you accomplished,
Right, 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 right,
for
right.
yourselves? And so maybe traveling, might be whatever else it may be. So, but if we can even segment that out, and let's say, okay, we need X number of dollars a month out of that. Well, then how much of that $5 million is needed for that? So it might be, let's say, $1.5 million or $2 million, whatever that may be, to generate the income that they want. So the next thing that we use then with the we is now more the family. Like you said, you took your kids down to the ball game, and it's the things that we want to do. But a lot of times when we're looking at that, a lot of people want to leave a legacy, but what can we do to impact the family now while we're alive, where we can see it and enjoy it, And whether it's the kids or the grandkids or whatever else it may be, is how to be able to impact that and X number of dollars too. So how much are we going to use to impact the we, okay, and then the thee is, again, you and I are very similar in this aspect, is that, we're put on this earth to make the world a better place. And so how can we impact the world in general? And it may be charities, different philanthropy, but what other impacts can we make with that as well? And it's kind of unique and interesting though. But we have these conversations with some of these high net worth individuals, they never thought of it that way, and so then
Yeah.
basically they're afraid to help their kids. They're afraid to help, because they're worried that they don't have enough money themselves. So if we can do the math and kind of figure that out, or give them permission. If you want to do a donor advised fund and you want to go ahead and do $10,000 a year in charities. You have enough money, you're fine. But may have never not done that math, you
Well,
know?
it's interesting because sometimes you get that psychology, you get that conversation where was with the family the other day, and they're potential clients to work with, and they're 5 million and a little above $5 million. Well, we're not planning on leaving anything to our kids. And I was like, well, I got bad news for you. You are.
Yeah.
There's no possible way you're spending it. And you start doing the math and showing them like, there's no possible way you can. Well, we're going to spend. If you're giving it all to charity, that's a different conversation. Well, no, we're not thinking of that. Well, then you're not spending this. You can't and you try and show it to them, and you show them the math. Like, you can't spend this. I guess you could technically go the old movie Brewster's Millions and be forced to do this, but probably not going to change your stripe. You made this. You made it a certain way. You're not, a tiger doesn't change their stripes, so to speak. The old saying. So it's like, yeah, you're looking at it a little differently. On that, when we talk about this stuff, though, just as an aside, as we're using statistics and stuff, and you'll see the quotes on this. Our producer Dave will have to look up Brewster's Millions. It's an older movie with Richard Pryor. It's from 50 years ago, I think. But the premise was, you had to spend a lot of money to get a certain amount of money. Back then, I think he had to spend $1 million in 30 days.
Is that your official disclosure there, John?
Yeah. Brewster's Millions, Dave.
We'll have to look it up.
Well, you've seen it. You live that.
Oh yeah, right? It's been a long time.
Actually, it was like in today's day and age, it was like he had to spend $1 million in like 30 days, and it was like or maybe $30 million in 30 days, or whatever, some sort of quote unquote impossible number. And now you think, oh yeah, you could do that pretty easily nowadays. Just crazy how numbers have changed. But
well, it's funny when numbers change too, because we've dealt with clients for many, many years, and some of them may only started with $1 million or $2 million, and now they're considered high net worth individuals, right? Because they doubled or triple what they've had. And so I was even doing some of the math that we were talking about with when they set up their original estate plan and for the charities, and then when we were kind of revisiting that later on down the road, when we do the math and found out how much each charity's going, he's like, okay, I need to spread this out a little bit more, because he had a lot more money than he would have even thought he would have been leaving.
Well, and on that thought, it is interesting when you're looking at it, because you do, as you start leaving more significant dollars, you start looking maybe at that charity a little bit differently. You start going, well, I gave them whatever, it doesn't matter the dollar amount. Let's say it was a small percentage. I gave them 1% of our net worth. You're probably not thinking too much about that. You're going, well, whatever that number is, mentally, there's still 99 other percent going elsewhere, right? But when it starts getting to be certain dollar amounts, you start looking at those things differently, going, is this the place I want to leave it to? And we had a family a while back, and when they looked at it, she kind of looked and said, it's too much money to that particular charity. Like you said, I just dollars and cents wise, she's like, boy, our family would be by far the largest donor to that charity. I don't want to be that way and have, so it was really interesting when you start looking at that, so.
Well, so if we're dealing with this, then John, so with some of the high net worth individuals, what are some of the most important things? Obviously, there's many different things that we have to consider, but what are just some of the things that are most important to have to deal with when you're dealing with high net worth?
Well, they need to know how to contact me directly.
Exactly.
Once they know that, then everything else will fall into place.
Absolutely.
No. I think, Mike, it's interesting because it's from the outside point of view, I've seen a lot of, you refer to a lot of different people in this category, right? And when you meet them, a lot of times the person they're working with, or the people they've been referred to, or the people they're interviewing, treat them differently because of the zeros behind their name. By and large, as you start off, people are all the same. We have hey, I know I have $5 million, but remind me, take 30 seconds and show me how I'm not running out of money. Let's make sure we're on the same page, right? So we still walk them through the same categories and the same path, make sure we're not running out of money, making sure we have good healthcare coverage and what our answers are there, making sure, like you said, the estate plan, et cetera. So you still walk through the same category stuff, but you just do it a little quicker. And it's probably a little easier, right? But you're looking by and large at those components. But I think you in our category, our SMART plan, our sources of income. Well, that's, like you said, you might earmark some money for the sources of income, but it's not as hard if there's more zeros there. Yeah. But you still have to do it. Your medical expense planning, your advanced planning when you're talking about estate planning. Now, in each of those categories, they're where income might be easier. Advanced planning might be a little bit more difficult, right? Because you have more, like you said, more charities, more different components. Your R stands for, reduction in risk or paying attention to that. This might not be reduction in financial risk. Maybe you're a little different there because of the net worth and the income you need, but it might be more, what are the outside areas of risk? Like, property and casualty. Do you have an umbrella policy, or do you have proper coverage? And then obviously the big one, that smart ends in T, that the tax planning, I think, is where we spend so much of our time when we're talking about high net worth people.
Yeah, the issue is just like anything else. The bigger the estate, the bigger the mistakes that can be made, right? The bigger the tax impact that can be there. The bigger even the income can impact them. There's could be reductions in Social Security to if they're not doing the proper income planning. Whether it's the IRMA or whether it's some of the other things that can happen. And so a lot of it comes down to that, right? So I think one of the keys and the staples when you're dealing with some of this stuff, it really comes down to the tax planning itself, and so, that's one of the main things because, a lot of individuals, like you said earlier, if they've been putting into their plans, and especially if your husband and wife both working for, 30 years or more, oftentimes they do have, 7-figure retirement funds each even, right? And that's like, that can be this tax ticking
I
time
was going to say
bomb,
some of that, some of that might have a huge tax burden. Some of that might have, depending on how it is, right? Because not all money's taxed the same. So depending on where that money is coming from in that situation could be a dramatic thing. Absolutely.
So using some of the strategies that are out there, and and a lot of things we talk about in many of the podcasts as well, as like maybe doing some Roth conversions potentially, depending when they retire. Looking at when we mentioned already today, some of the donor advised funds, especially if they are being charitable. Um, and even when they get closer to the required minimum distribution age, using some of the QCDs potentially,
Yep. Yep.
for that.
Yep. Qualified
Um,
charitable distributions for sure.
and there's different wealth transfer strategies we can use. So, sometimes, just like we talked about earlier, is, the I, we, the me, we, thee, is sometimes they do want to leave a certain amount of money, whether it's to a charity or to their family. So sometimes they can set aside a certain amount of money to be left, and there's different strategies we can use for that. And then I think really one of the big things is that they have after tax dollars is using some of you know, the strategies that are out there, whether it's direct indexing or tax loss harvesting, are two of the popular things that a lot of times they're using right now.
Well, and I think the thing that I think there's a couple of different parts there. The idea of the tax planning for their usage, right? Currently in that situation, the idea of the advanced tax planning for whether it's leaving that legacy or whatnot. But it is really interesting because as you talk through that, it is um like you said, we talk about the want versus the need. There are families that you work with that it's a need, and that generates, or that feeling is the beginning part of the conversation. Oh, I'm concerned about and you're dealing with those need concerns all the time. When it's a want, you're looking at it a little bit differently. Sometimes but what's very interesting is. You mentioned it in the planning. It's kind of the different generation, right? The different, like your husband and wife together, your spouse when someone passes away, going to the kids or whatnot. That is where some of the concern takes on a little bit differently, because it's like, okay, hey, we did this, we know what we're doing. When it goes to our kids, they are not aware of how much is there. We haven't talked to them about it, or they didn't earn it this way. So that gets into a different conversation in planning too, when you're talking about taxation and making sure how it gets there, right? So it's an interesting component.
Oh, there's no question about it. There's so many layers when it comes down to that, of, just the tax planning itself, right?
Yeah, 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 for sure.
It is utilizing the proper strategies when it comes down to that. Well, and like you talked about even earlier too, real estate is just one example, but some of these individuals are small business owners, and so they may have need to have put together a succession plan, for their business, or they may have a one-time big taxable event because they're selling a business, and so it's utilizing that, but also leading up to that, so there might be buy-sell agreements, when it comes down to that, or, if they need some planning while they still have their business, what types of things can they use? And people don't think about that because when they have a small business, oftentimes that's their most valuable asset, and it might be, that alone may be that $5 million asset. So how do we transition that to now to dollars and cents later on down the road? And what's the best way
And
to
what does it
do
do?
that?
Yes. And what does the next generation, or what is the next step? How do people interpret that? Right. Uh, we had a family we were working with, and the husband had built this massive collection of stuff. And the conversation with him was, well, my kids get this when I die. And it was like, okay, what do you mean by that? And he kind of gave me a weird look. And I said, well, they get it when you die. They get the collection and they're going to hold on to the collection. Is that what you're interpreting? Or they get he's like, no, I want them to sell it immediately. Here, it's worth this. They sell it and they can live off that. Well, then you get to the kids and you're trying to tell them, no, we're not going to sell it. Dad really loved it. No, I'm glad we had the conversation so I could say to them, no, he did not. He loved the collection. He's no, when you're emotionally done holding on to this, he's expecting you to sell it as money to use, right? But that's a unique conversation because their immediate thought was, Dad loved this so much. This is a connection to Dad. Let's keep this alive. And so there's some conversation there where you have to have when you're doing some of this high net worth planning as well, because you might see something. Like I said, it's not just, hey, you have this one stock or this one bond. That's very, very rare. It's like you have this massive, portfolio of all these different things, and how are each of them looked at? Like you said, how is the business looked at? What's the interpretation of those, and what's the purpose of it?
Well, it's funny you say that. One of the things that we learned as well, which I thought I took it to heart a little bit as well, is they talk about, let's say you have, different situations in different families, as we
Sure.
know, but the line was love them equally and treat them uniquely, and so I thought that was a really good line, is because, all of our kids and all of our family members may be a little bit different, and so, you hear about the individuals and where the son might have took over the business, but then they split everything equally amongst the three, there's lots of different things we have to consider, um, or, maybe, we hear this oftentimes that, my kids don't need the money, type thing too, so they make more money than me, that kind of stuff too. And so how do we set that up, properly? And I think a lot of the times, and it was a really good point too, especially when you're dealing with high net individuals, is oftentimes they'll write it down and they'll have it in their document, but they're not really explaining themselves to their kids, right? And so it's after the fact, and it's just a surprise. And so, one of the things that we encourage oftentimes, especially with some of these high net worth individuals, is to have a family meeting and let them know why you did what you did. And so you're avoiding some of that stuff
Well,
later on
that's it.
down the road,
That's
right?
it. Well, we had a family we were working through this with, and we were having this conversation, I would consider this family. I would consider these the patriarch and matriarch of the family. I talk to them on a regular basis, and I think I've learned as much from them as I've been able to help with the family. I think, and one of the things he said was, if I'm not transferring my wisdom, then they're not going to understand the wealth, something to that effect, right? And
Yeah.
he's like, if I don't teach them why I did it, how I did it, where I did it, he's like, they're not going to listen to me all the time because I'm the dad and I get it. He goes, and there's a lot of times where it might not be the right time. They're thinking of something else. He said, but they have to hear these nuggets. And that family has 2 meetings a year on wealth and understanding. And I've been a part of a couple of them. And it's that conversation. One of them is generally at the holidays, because everybody's in town and everybody's together. One of them they do during the summer. And I took from that, my family does a Sauger Olympics during the summer, and everybody's in town and doing stuff. And they do a similar component, and that's one of the times where they're like, okay, before we get started, let's get the business side out of it. And they do have that conversation, and I think it's really unique because that family, they're each of the children, and I know all of the children, and each, most of them are clients as well, but each of the children or spouses, there's an understanding of what does this mean, what is it there, and one of the original conversations that came up, and you said where a family member says, well, that child doesn't need it, they make more than me or whatnot. It came up with this family, and the one son does very, very well, very, very big in real estate, owns property all over the world, does very, very well. One of the interesting components is, um I wasn't there, or I did, but this was relayed to me of, well, yes, I make more, but I still want the money as I want to be part of this as part of the family. It's like, I know my sisters and brothers need money. He said, but I'm going to do more good with this. I don't need it. So I'm going to do a lot. And it was really interesting the way the conversation came about. And it was like, well, they don't need the money, but he still wants it. And not because he needs the money, but because he still wants to be equal with the rest of the family. So it's a really interesting component.
Yeah, or he may use it for a greater
Yeah, for
good
greater
too,
good.
whatever
Absolutely.
that may be,
Absolutely.
which then, which is great to see as well.
Absolutely.
So,
So
um,
it goes back to that conversation though, what you just said of having that interaction. We do see that a lot where it's families that think one way, like I said, I'm going to spend it all. No, you're not. You have too much money, right? I don't want that to be mean, but that's how, or, this child doesn't need it or this one doesn't need it. Again, you have to have those conversations, right? It's the and I don't remember the story. We've heard those stories before where it's like, a lottery winner is back in worse financial shape than they were before because they didn't learn. They weren't taught that, right? And if you leave a legacy to kids and they don't know it's coming, sometimes it is kind of like a lottery situation.
yeah. So I think the last thing I want to kind of touch on then, John, with the high net worth, I think is that if there's one thing we can learn, and again, a lot of it is whether are they single taxpayers or are they joint taxpayers. But that tax return itself can tell a huge story, and when we're dealing with that, and again, if we're dealing with businesses, whether it's corporations or LLCs or S corps or C corps, there's a lot more things involved with it. Or if they are having retirement plans, they use SEPs or solo 401ks or simple IRAs. There's lots of different things we can utilize, but the issue is how is that's layered. Like I had I deal with individuals all the time, and we look at the tax return that might be fine for that, um, for joint taxpayer, okay, but is it for that, one if
Yeah,
something
yeah,
would happen
yeah.
to one of them,
Yes, yes.
how is that gonna impact that
Down
next
the road.
down the road? And again, as a single or as a higher net worth individuals, the impact can be worse, right? And so we just got to we have to consider that a lot, because a lot of people are just looking at the dollars and cents coming in to the household, not thinking about the tax impact later on down the road.
Well, and it's not just that. It's not just that. Like, there are some people that are just so busy accumulating it that's just not been part of their thought process, right? Like, I mean, like you said, going to some of the small business owners or whatnot, a lot of times they're the magic of the small business and they're running. We have a family that he sold his business and he's like, yeah, I didn't look up for 30 years. I was just building the business. Now I look up, I have these assets, I have the situation. I gotta look at it differently.
Yeah.
You see that one pretty common, I think, for a lot of smaller businesses, but quote unquote, smaller business that's successful has probably amassed $2, 3, $4 million. And then you put money in investments and now you're at that high net worth category.
No, we definitely want to consider that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So should we leave that part there?
Yeah,
Okay. I
yeah.
mean, again, with every subject matter I think we go through, we could have an hour, 2 hour, 3 hour conversation. So the idea is if you're listening to this, we'll probably circle back to this again in other categories as well, or in other episodes.
Well, and I think also, this is very surface level because literally the more assets you have, the more unique your situation can be, and so we can't sit here and spout off and, well, this is what you should do, this is what you should do, this is what you should do, and that's why people hire us in the first place. And if they do want to hire us, John, how do they get hold of us?
So they can call us at the 800 number, call into the office and touch base with us, 800-977-9292.
Or they can go to the website, right? FSA1.com, and they can actually book direct appointments with us if they'd like, or reach out directly or send us an email.
Absolutely.
We'd be happy to do a complimentary consultation with you.
Absolutely. So this is a good time where we do our holistic happenings segment. And so in this situation, we a lot of times we won't even necessarily prep. It'll just kind of look, who do you want to take it? Do you want me to take it? Because we see this so often where it's that holistic conversation of people meeting together. And the example I want to use really quick, I want to jump on this one. I was teaching a workshop the other day, and which you can come to our website and attend any of our workshops, right? Any of our seminars, any of our workshops here, you can come. But I was teaching at one the other day, and I was using some examples of stuff, and I had a potential client, a person that attended, came up to me afterwards, and he said, I can't unsee that. He said, all those things connecting together. He's like, that's what I need. And he said, I wish you would have spent the entire time talking about that. And I said, well, the hard part is if we just did a seminar saying, or a workshop saying, come to our holistic wealth planning, or whatever, people don't know what that word is. So he and I talked for a little bit and just had a brief conversation. And he's like, when we talked about the holistic side of it, what stuck in his head? And I asked him, I said, holistic meaning, everything, the whole part together. And when we talk about holistic wealth planning or holistic happenings, it's all the different parts that we see that we might have conversation. And when I asked him what it meant to him and what he said, and it kind of goes back a little bit to this high net worth conversation, but it was very interesting. He said, John, what holistic planning means to me is you're my person or you're my team. He said, I call you and I don't have to do anything else. You guys have it. And that was a unique story that I heard from him. I was like, that's exactly what we're trying it to be, right? That's exactly where it is. We've built systems to take care of all these different things at our company, whether you need all of them or some of them or whatnot, right? But that component of someone that we just met, he had, let's say, an hour to an hour and a half's interaction of our office, right? The slideshow beforehand. So he really didn't know much beyond that. But that category, he's like, wait a minute. And the wording he put to it is, I can call one place and you guys have me taken care of on all the things. You know what's going on in my life. And so I thought that was really cool from a holistic side.
Well, and responsibly, and actually, what this is actually makes more sense to me now you said that. We talk oftentimes about, if you have a CEO of a corporation, right? A CEO, they're the ones that make the final decisions, but most of those people have a CFO,
Yeah.
right, to be able to handle the financial decisions. So, if you have a high net worth individual, husband and wife could be co-CEOs, but doesn't it make sense to have a CFO as well, to help make the best decisions for themselves and for their families? And ultimately, the CFO just helps make the decisions because the CEO is going to make the final decisions, right?
Exactly.
Our job is
Exactly.
really to educate and inform for them to make the best decisions for themselves and for their family.
Exactly. Really well said.
So that I like what you said because that just kind of reminded me, about that because we talk about that quite often.
Often. Yeah. Oftentimes it comes up.
All right, I think we're ready to wrap up here, John.
Absolutely.
So if you want to get a hold of us, you can call our 800 number, 1-800-977-9292.
Or the website is fsa1.com.
Thank you for listening to the Retireable Podcast. I'm Mike Wallace.
And I'm John Sauger.
Have a wonderful day.
Investment advisory products and services are made available through FSA Advisors, FSAA, a registered investment advisor. Annuity and insurance products are offered through Financial Services of America. Financial Services of America, FSA, Health Insurance Agency. Doing business as FSA Insurance Agency, FSA Tax and Accounting. An FSA, advisors are commonly owned and operated by FSA Marketing Incorporated, FSAM. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. The insurance products offered by Financial Services of America, FSA, are not subject to investment advisory requirements. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. FSAA is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. Chartered Retirement Planning, Counselor, and CRPC are trademarks or registered service marks of the College for Financial Planning in the United States and / or other countries. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by FSAA. This testimonial was provided by an individual who is not a current client of Financial Services of America and FSA Advisors. No compensation was paid for this testimonial. There are no material conflicts of interest relating to this testimonial. This testimonial reflects the experience of one individual and may not be representative of the experience of other individuals. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Individual results may vary based on market conditions, individual circumstances, and investment objectives. The individual providing this testimonial received no compensation, financial or otherwise, for providing this statement. The testimonial was provided voluntarily and reflects the individual's genuine experience with our advisory services. Investment advisory services involve risk, including the potential loss of principal. No guarantee of investment performance or outcomes is implied by this testimonial.